Look, you saw the title. You know it. I know it. The Chargers are somewhere on this list.
Here's the problem. Nobody wants to say it because we all believe that Brandon Staley is a great young mind, but he's the reason that the Los Angeles Chargers aren't in the playoffs.
This year's regular season offered excitement from start to finish. But that's not to say that the 2021 campaign wasn't without its fair share of disappointments. Here's a dive into the NFL's 10 biggest disappointments from this year. Indianapolis Colts. In Week 18, the Colts looked like a bona fide playoff and maybe even Super Bowl contender throughout most of the 2021 season. Jonathan Taylor ran away with the rushing title. Carson Wentz seemed to be turning things around after a disastrous final year in Philadelphia. The DeForest Buckner-Darius Leonard defense was feisty once again. And the Colts even beat up some top teams like the New England Patriots, Arizona Cardinals, and Buffalo Bills. Nobody wanted to play these Colts come playoff time. All Indy needed was a win against the 2-14 Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 18 to clinch a postseason berth. It should have been an easy win.
That sounds simple enough, doesn't it?
But nope, the Colts straight up choked. Like, we're talking worse than their choke job in the second half of Super Bowl 44. Wentz was sacked 6 times. The Colts turned it over twice and got 0 stops when it mattered most. The final result, a 26-11 win for the NFL's worst team in front of a disgruntled fan base dressed up as clowns against a playoff hopeful team that featured 7 Pro Bowlers. It is not an exaggeration to call that the worst loss in Colts history. And this came a week after they blew a win-and-you're-in game against the Las Vegas Raiders at home. Russell Wilson. As we saw in 2018, 2019, and 2020, the Seahawks were only as good as Russell Wilson was. This team lacked the defense, offensive line, and ground game to be a true title contender. There were rumors about Wilson wanting out of Seattle, having apparently grown frustrated with management and personnel decisions. But he suited up for the defending NFC West champs, gearing up for at least one more Super Bowl run in Emerald City. But Wilson's play, both before and after his finger injury against the Rams in Week 5, was far from what we were used to seeing from the 8-time Pro Bowler. Even though the Seattle defense actually improved, finishing 11th in scoring, and even though Rashad Penny finally broke out, Wilson wasn't able to take advantage of any of it. His 64.8 completion percentage was Wilson's lowest mark since 2017. The 222.4 passing yards he averaged per game were well short of the 263.3 he averaged a year ago. Think about that. That's about 40 less passing yards per game. He had 0 game-winning drives for the first time in his career, and his 53.9 quarterback rating was easily the worst mark of Wilson's entire career. Yes, he missed 3 games because of the finger injury, but Wilson never really looked elite all season long. And it added up to the Seahawks' first losing season under his watch, and just their second non-playoff campaign since he entered the league in 2012. Los Angeles Chargers down the stretch. It's unfortunate, but even when the Chargers looked great throughout 2021, there was always that feeling in the back of our minds that they would blow it in a classic Chargers fashion.
Don't screw up like you always do. You're gonna blow it! That's what I get for having faith in you.
And sure enough, it happened. This team won 4 of its first 5 games, including statement wins at Arrowhead against the Chiefs in Week 3 and a thrilling victory over the Browns in Week 5. Through Week 14, the Chargers stood at 8-5 and seemingly had a playoff spot locked up. Only a total meltdown down the stretch could leave them out of the postseason. Well, wouldn't you know it, the Chargers lost at home to the Chiefs in Week 15. Then, they got dominated by the lowly Houston Texans in Week 16. After crushing the Denver Broncos in Week 17, the Chargers just needed a tie or a win over the Las Vegas Raiders in Week 18 to clinch. But even a monster effort from Justin Herbert in the fourth quarter was not enough. The sophomore quarterback helped get his team to overtime, but just when it looked like Vegas might play for the tie, Brandon Staley curiously called a timeout.
Chargers take a timeout.
What?
Yeah,
I think the Raiders were playing to get it down to either a field goal or just let the clock run out, and the Chargers took the timeout.
I'm trying to process this myself.
Wow.
I know. I know.
That caused the Raiders to have a change of heart. They decided to go for the win instead, and Daniel Carlson's game-winning field goal eliminated the Bolts while sending the Pittsburgh Steelers to the postseason. This team hired Staley, made some big-time signings in Corey Linsley and Jared Cook, and they had a great draft with picks like Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel Jr., and Josh Palmer. Not to mention, star safety Derwin James Jr. was finally healthy this season. All of that somehow only added up to a 9-8 record and no postseason. The Chargers failed to live up to expectations again. When will it end?
You ever wonder at what point you gotta just say you gotta stop living up here, start living down here?
Atlanta Falcons offense. First, the Falcons decided to hire an offensive-minded coach in Arthur Smith. Then, they decided to keep Matt Ryan. Then, they prioritized the offense in free agency by signing Mike Davis and Cordarrelle Patterson. Then, they continued to prioritize the offense by drafting Kyle Pitts 4th overall. It looked like Atlanta had hoped their explosive offense would be enough to get them back to the playoffs. However, the offense was anything but explosive. Atlanta went from 16th in scoring a year ago to 26th in 2021, averaging a measly 18.4 points per game. Only 3 teams finished with less total yards of offense. Matty Ice was sacked 40 times and finished with the 4th lowest passing yards total of his career, even with the extra 17th game. And his 20 touchdown passes were tied for his 2nd fewest in a season. Yikes! Pitts had a monster rookie year, and Patterson flourished in an expanded role in Smith's offense. Even without Calvin Ridley for all but 5 games, Atlanta's offense should have at least been able to average more than 20 points per game, given all of their offseason investments. First-year head coaches, minus Nick Sirianni. This entry starts with Urban Meyer. That was far and away the most disastrous NFL head coaching stint in history. Like, oh boy. Then there's Arthur Smith, who couldn't help Atlanta's offense get going in year 1. Robert Saleh, a renowned defensive genius, oversaw a New York Jets defense that finished dead last in both yards and points allowed. Brandon Staley was supposed to take the Chargers to the playoffs, but his overly aggressive play calling eventually caught up to him. Dan Campbell and David Culley did what they could with awful Detroit Lions and Houston Texans teams, but they both endured 13-loss seasons. Sirianni took the Philadelphia Eagles to the postseason following a miserable 4-win season. He was the only rookie head coach who actually made reasonable progress with his new team. Add it all up, and these first-year head coaches finished with a combined record of 38-76-1. The Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were widely expected to compete for a playoff spot in 2021, but like the Chargers, you just had to figure that Minnie would find a way to blow it. Again. Kirk Cousins had another excellent statistical season. Dalvin Cook hit over 1,000 rushing yards again. Justin Jefferson was even better in 2021 following his historic rookie year. And, oh yeah, Minnie made reinforcements on defense. They had a healthier Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, and Danielle Hunter was back as well. They should have easily been a playoff team with a top 10 defense. But Minnesota's D was once again a mess under Mike Zimmer. The offense put up numbers, but didn't show up when it mattered most, as evidenced by the fact that 8 of Minnie's 9 losses were decided by 1 score. For the first time under Zimmer, Minnie missed the playoffs in consecutive years. That led them to canning Zimmer and GM Rick Spielman. This franchise just keeps taking more and more steps backward. That trip to the 2017 NFC Championship game really feels like a lifetime ago now. Baltimore Ravens pass defense. The Ravens had a top 10 scoring defense every year from 2016 to 2020. Sure, injuries to star corners Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters didn't help, but it's always been next man up in Baltimore, yet none of their other defensive backs stepped up this year. The 2021 Ravens finished 19th in scoring defense. They were dead last against the pass, allowing 278.9 yards per game. Yet, oddly, they had the league's top-ranked run D. Isn't that funny? Not having Lamar Jackson for the final 4 games can be cited as the main factor of the Ravens missing the postseason, but the lack of plays from their usually stingy secondary hurt too. They also had just 34 sacks. Only 8 teams recorded less. And finally, Baltimore's opportunistic D had just 15 takeaways, tied for 3rd fewest in the league. Needless to say, the Ravens will happily welcome Peters and Humphrey back next season. SAQUON Barkley. Yes, we know the New York Giants have a horrendous offensive line, and the lackluster quarterback play by Daniel Jones, Mike Glennon, and Jake Fromm did not help. But still, this is a guy who hit over 1,000 rushing yards in each of his first 2 seasons, including 1,307 back in his rookie year. And trust us, the Giants O-line was horrible back then as well. But after missing all but 2 games last year, Barkley avoided serious injuries and played 13 games in 2021. And yet, he didn't spark the New York offense in the slightest. Barkley averaged just 45.6 rushing yards per game, barely more than half of what he averaged as a rookie. He was getting just 3.7 yards per carry in 2021 and finished with only 2 rushing touchdowns. Not only did he have just one 100-yard game, but Barkley also surpassed 64 rushing yards only once all year. New York simply needed far better from the former 2nd overall pick. Rookie quarterbacks. Maybe the play of the 2020 rookie quarterbacks raised the bar too high, but this year's crop of freshman QBs was quite the disappointment, to say the very least. Trevor Lawrence, the first pick of the 2021 draft, couldn't get much of anything going in Duval. Labeled as a generational prospect, he completed only 59.6% of his passes for 3,641 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 17 picks. In 13 starts for the New York Jets, 2nd overall pick, Zach Wilson, completed 55.6% of his passes and had just 9 touchdowns against 11 picks. He took a whopping 44 sacks in those 13 games and fumbled 5 times. Trey Lance didn't see much playing time because the San Francisco 49ers committed to Jimmy Garoppolo. Not that it's entirely his fault, but Justin Fields also didn't provide a whole lot of excitement for the Chicago Bears. Mac Jones looked pretty solid for most of his rookie year and helped the New England Patriots return to the postseason. But he still threw 13 picks, fumbled 7 times, and was held to under 200 passing yards in 5 games. This was a highly touted QB draft class, and Davis Mills, a 3rd rounder, was easily the 2nd best rookie signal caller of 2021 behind Jones. Baker Mayfield. It's hard to say the entire Cleveland Browns team was a disappointment. They fielded one of the NFL's elite defenses led by superstar Myles Garrett. Nick Chubb had another fantastic year, powering the game's 4th best rushing offense. So how did the Browns finish 8-9 and out of the playoffs following an 11-win season and a trip to the AFC divisional round? Well, you can point the finger at Baker Mayfield. Mayfield went 6-8 as the starter. It's a small sample size, but backup Case Keenum looked a lot better in the 2 games he played. Mayfield had just 17 touchdowns against 13 picks. He averaged a career-low 215 passing yards per game and finished with a horrible 35.3 quarterback rating. Yes, he played injured for most of the season. His toughness and determination should never be questioned. But the fact remains, if he's out there on the field, he is expected to help this team win, not cause his team to lose. And in 2021, it appeared as though the former 1st overall pick was doing a lot more of the latter. But what was your biggest disappointment from the 2021 NFL season? Join us in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.